Hi, I'm Ruth Kenner, and I'm speaking from my channel in my studio, Get Quilts Done. And today I'm going to talk about applying binding. And I've been quilting and sewing for many years, and I've been binding for the whole time. And I usually will find fabric that I love for binding, and I'll make a lot of it, and then I'll use it on one quilt or maybe another one, and then I'll go to another quilt, and I realize it's not the right size or I want something different. And through the years, I collected things, and I decided that the best method has got to be to streamline it. So I prepare all the quilts the same way. When I'm done quilting, I've got the batting, the sandwiches done, and I have to cut it down and trim it down. I do it, prepare it the same way. Then I get to the next stage, the binding. I'm always going to use the same size binding, and I've come up with using the same method for one and two, but yet having three different methods for actually applying it. And that way I could make big batches of strips of bias, because I always use bias, and I can use it from quilt to quilt. And push comes to shove, if I want to use it for applique, I can always trim it down. And that way I could make piles of it, and I could streamline the whole process. So this is going to be a series, and the first part of the series is I'm going to show you how I actually trim down and prepare the quilt to make sure that it's going to lay flat, or it's going to be on a bed or hang on a wall, and will have the look that I want it to. And what are the tools? I have some special tools that I've hacked to do that. And that's what I'm doing right now. And then I'm going to show you how I prepare binding, and then I'm going to show you the best part, actually sewing it on. So this is the first one of the series. Let's get started. Here I go. We are going to begin, but before I want to show you this gizmo, and there'll be a link. It is made for pictures, but it's got a lot of really nice things to it, cool things to it, a leveler and all sorts of things. And it'll also stick to things. You can see the bottom of it. But for our use, I put it right here, okay, somewhere along here. And I turn this on. And it's really important not to look at those red lights. You could look at the light coming out, but you don't want to look straight at it. And this helps me adjust it. And I'm going to show you that this works even if you have a big quilt and it's on the floor. Look at that. It goes straight to the other side. And that means for you, you get to be able to really get a good idea if this is laying straight. You don't have to use it all the way. Of course, you can't use it to really cut or anything to mark, but it gives a good guide to how well your quilt is lining up on the edges, and that's a really big deal. So here it is. It's all laid out the way I want it to be. I have it prepared to use the rulers. The rulers you actually need either if you're marking it and you're going to use shears, or if you're going to actually use the rotary cutter. If I have a really big quilt, I will mark it and then use my shears most of the time. And a small quilt like this, I'll be using a rotary cutter. And you can see I'm lining it up. And what I'm checking for is to make sure that I don't have more than 1/8 of an inch of the batting and backing showing. That's what I'm checking, because I don't. I want to feel comfortable and put on the binding and making sure that none of the batting is going to show. And I'm at least using whatever method I'm using, because I'm going to be teaching 3 different ways of applying the batting. Applying the binding. Whatever method I'm using, I'm always going to need at least 1/4 of an inch, and so 1/8 of an inch is fine protection for that. And you can see I'm looking and I'm checking to make sure that the light is good. And of course, you do see some of the waves. After I cut it down, you're going to see that it's not going to be wavy at all. And I'm going to use another ruler just to make sure that it lines up beautifully the way that I want it to be lined up. And stressing again, I'm not looking at the bulbs. You'll hear me say that several times because there's all these warnings on it. I don't look at the bulbs, I just look at the red light. And when I say don't look at the light, that's impossible because you need the light. You need to look at the light, but you don't want to look at the red bulb. I'm going out. So you could see it's straight. I don't need this anymore. Voila, it's gone. Okay, I turn it off and I'm careful not to look at the lights going straight into where the light's coming from. And now, if I want to make it easier, I'll just use this and I'll cut this. Just like that. I already decided 2 1/8 from the inner border. All right, so now I do the next part, and I basically do the same thing, and I want to make sure that the borders aren't wavy, and because they look wavy, because the batting was wavy because it hadn't been quilted. So let's see. Nope, it's fine. It's fine. I can just smooth it out and a little bit of pressing, and it is fine. So then I go to the next part and I take my little gadget and I do the same thing and I make sure that it's straight. And this is really frustrating if it's not, but I had already a feeling it was because you get kind of good at eyeing things. So there you go, it's straight. If I move the camera, you can see how it looks really wavy, but it's not after I cut it down. So if it would still be, I would go ahead and add an extra quilting stitch to it, okay? But there it goes. It is exactly where I want it. I just cut it using the rulers. I turn this off and I'm really careful not to look at it. This is just a speeded up version of me cutting down the sides. As you can see, I move the quilt around quite a bit to get comfortable, making sure I'm just cutting it and not hurting myself and not cutting the table or any of the other things that are going on. And of course, this is so quick. I moved it up. When you're actually cutting, you're taking your time and making sure you're accurate and that you do not hurt yourself. And there it is, and I'm just checking, no wavy borders. It's ready to go, moving it to the sewing machine. So here we are, we're looking at the computer screen or the machine screen. I always look at that first. Whatever's going on there is telling me what's really going on with my sewing machine, and that's what's so important. Out of practice, make it a habit of always looking at the stitch plate. You could see the number 9mm, that changes depending what's up there, but you always have a picture of the stitch plate and a needle. And I always check that. In this case, it is correct. You could see a picture above that'll come up. That's the 9mm. That's what I use for this because I'm going to be doing different things, and the 9mm, I don't want to change it around, and it works fine. But I make it a habit, matter what. I always check to make sure that it matches what I'm doing and what I want to do. That way safety is always there. And you can see it's very simple. And once you get used to it and you make a habit out of it, it just flows. Now I'm in the utility stitches. And I'm not usually in the utility stitches when I quilt, but this is one of the few times that I do. I actually am making a mock serger stitch to finish off the edge. I would like a serger, but even for this, I would probably always use it for this because I like to cut it beforehand with a straight line to make sure it matches up. You can see I'm looking at the foot pressure. Anything in yellow, by the way, is my default where I've overrode it, and I'll show you how I do that, okay? So, and I've tried and true for this method. Right now you can see I'm pointing at that little memory symbol. Well, the memory symbol is in yellow because I've made it yellow. So because I've changed the default number. So here we have, there's the foot pressure I've changed. I've made it a lot lighter because I have batting. That's the only one I will change if I am finishing off something for sewing clothes, but the rest I keep it here. This is where I like it. Everything has been tried a lot, but I encourage you, try these numbers, try your own numbers, but do finish it off and set it up the way you like to. I'm closing it out right now because I want to show you how I did it, because it's so important to get used to using the screen because it's such an asset. And why not use it? I use the 2A foot. Here's the picture of it above. I love the 2A foot for doing this. You can see there's a little bar underneath. That's making the top stitch, the tension, even weaker. I go ahead and even make it weaker because I don't want it to curl at all. And it's a really good foot. It didn't come with a sewing machine. I would recommend getting that foot. You can use a different foot for it though. All right, so going on, and then you would want to loosen the tension even more. So here's the tension. Like I said before, I do have it a lot looser, a lot lighter. That is to say, it goes right down, I think, to 3. Yep, there it is, to 3. And you can see once you do that, it goes in yellow, but it's not reset yet until I press the little memory button that it is. Okay, and there's the length. The length I goes all really a lot smaller. I like it really close in. And the stitch width is the only thing that I really keep the same. It's 4.5. I don't bother to change. And then I'm going to go to the foot tension. Now the foot pressure, I usually if I'm sewing clothes and I want to finish off an edge, this I'll put back to their default, but when I'm sewing something like with batting, I'll make it even looser. I'll experiment with it. But because I like these numbers so much, you can see I'll press on the eye and I have it in there. So once I press on the eye and I press that little box that I'll show you, has a little old-fashioned memory, the floppy disk kind of picture of it that we don't use anymore. Once it's there and it's in yellow, I could turn off the sewing machine, I could press the clear button, I can do anything I want, and it's always in there. The machine knows that that's what I want. Now, let's say I am sewing something, but I don't want to take it out of my default, but I want to find the manufacturers. You can see I'm going in there. Each one of them, I go in and I press the little box, and you can see what happens. It goes right back to the default that they want. And like I said, the foot pressure is probably the only one that I do change when I am sewing clothes. Okay, so if I press the CLR, you can see what happens. And everything is back to the default that I've chosen at this stage. Now we're looking at the needle. I have the needle in the up position all the time. And then we're going to the hover foot. And what I do is I love the hover foot, but I basically don't want to use it. So when the machine is in stopping position and the needle is down, the hover foot, I don't want it to go up. So I'm going to press the one on the left side and I'm going to keep it there for when I'm doing this kind of sewing. So now we're actually at the good part. We get to sew. And what I really like about this is that I have everything set up. I don't have to worry about anything, and I could really rely on the sewing machine to do its work. What you're seeing here is the foot actually has that bar that it's sewing over. It's hard to see, but it is sewing over the top stitch, and that's making the top stitch looser, or the tension not as tight, so it doesn't curl. And of course, as you saw, I made the tension even looser. And that works really well. The reason why I have the needle in up position when I stop is I don't want the needle to stop on the edge of the quilt or the edge of the fabric. Because if you see, it's actually every 3 stitches, I believe it is, it's actually sewing without fabric underneath it. So I don't want it to stop on that. I don't want it to move around. I don't want to break a needle. And also, if I do stop and I do decide to put the needle down, what would happen is if the hover foot was in use, it would actually pick up pieces of the fabric because it would, because of that bar underneath there. So it's just sewing along and it's cleaning it out really well. The magnifying glass, I do have a video on how to use the magnifying glass. And the reason I use it is I find that for most stitching, everyday sewing, this is a really big asset that I've had on my previous machine also. Then when I get to the edge, I just, you don't see it in the camera, but I'm actually pressing the little scissors and it's cutting it off. And when I pull it backwards in order that it doesn't get caught up. And now you're just seeing the edge when it comes into view. All right, it's the first part. There's a link to the gizmo that I used in the description. And this method has made it so my quilts actually lay flatter and I just feel less pressured. I hope that you could try it, and I'm hoping you'll see the next one coming out on how to make the binding, because that's been streamlined for a long time. But see you next time. Subscribe, like it, and you're welcome to leave comments. I'll try to get back to you. See you. Bye.